should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
أهلا، أنا عمران دقنيش. لقد رأيتني في سيارة الإسعاف في حلب. عندما أطاحت الطيارات الجوية بمنزل عائلتي. أنا بأمان الآن. أردت أن أجيب على تساؤل شخص ما حول مشاعري عن نفسي وعن عائلتي عن طريق قول أنا بخير وأنا أحبك أيضا يا ديفيد.
From Amram and Carey Films comes this true and tragic story of a small 3.5-year-old boy who lived in Aleppo, Syria. His name is Amram Daknish. He was seen one night in an ambulance with blood on his head. His family survived the worst night of their lives when Russian airstrikes destroyed his neighborhood. The world saw him, cried for him, remembers him today. The famous director, George Lucas, brings this story to life in a way you will never forget because it really happened. Rated PG-13.
Every generation is called to defend the faith of its fathers. Now, we are called to...
The inevitable outcome of our nation today is the perversion of people's ideals that communism and socialism is some way going to unite this nation together. Now here we are within 48 hours of the inauguration, and people are totally distraught by how the communists are going to do what they're going to do to this country, and most of those who smile and are just totally ecstatically happy and just laughing, dancing in the streets are those that have already accepted the idea that communism and socialism is some great thing that's going to bring all of the stuff they've wanted throughout their history. And I refer to the blacks. The blacks have always felt they were entitled to retribution. What does retribution mean to anybody? This means that you are giving the government the authority to strip away a person's personal freedom and rights to possess what they have. That means that they can come into your house, and under socialism and under Marxism, which is what Raphael Warlock believes in, they can come into your house and they can take everything you own and then say what Obama kept saying for 8 years: what's yours is now the government's, and we can decide what happens to it and what happens to you, and you have nothing. That is what socialism means. You are nothing, you have nothing, you are nothing. Everything, your personal assets, all of it now is owned by the government. The government can take it over and they can do whatever they want to with it. That is what's lost in the media. What they talk about is these are people who are fanatical insurgents, which is what Schumer called American citizens. So did Nancy Pelosi. She called American citizens domestic terrorists. A terrorist is somebody who's trying to overthrow the government. The people of the United States are the government. The Constitution says, we the people. That means if the government, if it exists for the people of America, it's our government. It is not Nancy Pelosi's government. It is not the communist government. It's not the socialist government. It is not Charlie Schumer's government. It is my government. It is your government. That is why it's called We the People. So when people come into the Capitol, and in some instances, yes, they had guns. Yes, they vandalized and broke into the Capitol, but those individuals were never shown to be Antifa, the people who were sent in to even the campaign for president during President Trump's first time as president. There were people who were transplanted by the communists, by the democratic socialists themselves, who caused rioting, caused picketing, caused all these disruptions during his campaign. Those are the same people who were sent into the protesters who went to the Capitol after President Trump's speech, where he was telling people, you as Americans have the rights as people of this country to stand up for your freedoms and to take back our government, which means you see we have no rights to vote because they changed the votes. They changed the election. They're going to say in every aspect of the word, there was no collusion, there was no anything. But when you see the fact that they went totally against what most of this country voted for, and that was for President Trump, and then they try and lie and say, well, there are certain key states that chose otherwise, that doesn't hold water, you know? And the American people themselves, in the end, have the rights to choose what happens to America. It is not up to the democratic socialists to make that decision. It is supposed to be up to me and to you as American citizens what happens to this nation. Not up to the communist, socialist, democratic government. What they're saying to all of us is that they now run this country, that we as Americans do not run anything. That is why when you see those protesters out there on Inauguration Day, they are protesting something that was illegitimate, and that was Joe Biden taking the presidency without any proof that he was entitled to be president. And you only have to do a comparison to how the Democrats treated President Trump in the last 4 years, and then say he went through all of that by the collusion, the lies of the socialists, the Democrats, and now today they themselves are using the same things they accused him of after he was elected. And they're saying this to all of us as American citizens: you haven't the right anymore to decide your own destiny. You have no right to choose what happens to you as an American, because now they're saying we've taken that away from you. You don't have a right to say anything anymore. The only choice we have as Americans from this day forward is not to pay taxes anymore. If you go to jail because you don't pay taxes, you're still not going to be paying into the system. And if enough people did that, and we all went to jail, the government couldn't function anymore. And that's the only option we have. It's called taxation without representation. Joe Biden's going to put everything back in place that Obama made for 8 years. Obama said this more than once: if you did a ratio of Americans to Muslims, you would see that America is the largest Muslim nation in the world. He said that. Obama himself is a Muslim. They advocate the kind of terrorism and violence that you've seen in nations across the world who have used terrorism to subjugate peoples of other nations, of other philosophies, to believe in Islam. And now the socialists are using that same concept against American citizens and say, we're going to use the radicalism of what is Islam, and now they're going to project it to say the Christians are now the radicals themselves. And they're used all the time the same footage they've been using about the fact that the Antifa people went into the Capitol, and they use all these scenes of vandalism and all the rest of it. It was overblown anyway by the media. They kept showing people hiding and ducking down and all the rest of this stuff. I tell you, if they were in countries like Istanbul, if they were in countries like Tehran, they'd be living with that every day. And now we're going to live with that every day as America. America's dead. Our Constitution is dead because the United States people have no rights to speak for themselves anymore. Now it is up to a radical regime called socialism, called communism, called totalitarianism, fascism. These things existed during the time that the Germans, the Nazis, were in power in Germany. They took away people's freedoms, they took away their rights, they subjugated their own people to this philosophy that Adolf Hitler kept saying over and over again. All the news last week, WSB-TV went on the air and they told the people of Georgia, this new government socialist system will no longer recognize that the Holocaust ever happened. This new socialist communist nation will no longer recognize the First or the Second World War. They won't recognize the Civil War. You're hearing them say, for us to be a communist nation, we have to look ahead and say the things that you've always valued as Americans now, they don't have validity anymore. They can't be recognized. In order for us to control you, you have to accept the new fanatical, radical change that the communists and socialists are going to bring about to this nation, which is you will pay taxes, you will have whatever we think you should have, and any and everything else you've ever valued your family, your history, your personal property, your whole life is now going to be molded and shaped under communism, under socialism. And you wanted it. Now I contend that in most instances, the system of our government, the elections themselves were manipulated. That means that if you had 100% of all the votes being for Perdue and for Kelly Loeffler, and the socialists said, we don't want them in there because we have to have their radical views about making sanctuaries of all states of the Union. We have to have a Marxist in there who is Raphael Warnock. Warnock in his book stated Marxism over 100 times. And the United States people look at that and laugh and say, you're just a conspirator. I'm like, you don't see history because you don't want to see history. And very soon you're going to see it lived out in this country called America, because you're going to be living under socialism, you're going to be living under Marxism. You're going to have somebody very similar to Joseph Stalin in the White House. It'll be Biden starting out, and then they'll put Kamala Harris in there in place of him. And then, before you know it, right out of the back screen of the shot is going to be Barack Obama. He's going to walk right in and say, y'all wanted me back, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere again. And then you're going to have to live under his 7 years of absolute horror, and it's called the Great Tribulation. Because Barack Obama is the Antichrist. And everything he does, everything he uses through Kamala Harris, through Nancy Pelosi, through Charlie Schumer, through Joe Biden, through his legions, his minions of followers across this world. Because you hear them saying this stuff all over the world. United Kingdom has its Writers Guild sitting there saying, we will not publish any of President Trump's memoirs. You know what I say? We don't care what you think in the United Kingdom, because you aren't Americans. You don't live here. Who cares what you think about whether you're going to publish something or not? There's several other countries who would probably do it. But the fact is, under the New World Order, they see no boundaries of other countries. All they see is a unified global government system of communism. And therefore it says there is no individual countries anymore. There are no sovereign nations anymore. It's all about a global system of government that is controlled and manipulated by a one world system. And what is it called? Oppression. Communism is the suppression of its people to fanatical, radical views, and everything and anything you believe about your life is over. Everything about who you were is over. It's about them. It's about them taking everything. Taxes are going to go sky high no matter what Joe Biden tried to say. Oh, we're not going to do it to people who make more than $40,000 a year. Gas prices are already going up. It used to be almost $5 a gallon. I promise you, within a year, our gas prices in America are going to go over probably $6, maybe $7 an hour. And again, the liberals want this. The socialists have convinced so many blacks around this country. This is going to give you everything, because now you can just take it legally away from other people. You can just take it right out of their houses. You can take anything you want. You see it, you want it, take it. Obama kept saying that too. You got to work, you stay home, I'll pay you a check. He did for 8 years. That's what Joe Biden's going to do. That's what Kamala Harris is going to do. That is what the socialists, the Communist Party itself of America, is now going to do. And I tell you, the irony is that people are just so idiotically stupid. They don't want to see anything. They don't want to hear anything. They want to live in their little bubble, which is their family. Whatever philosophy you have, it's been now shattered. Whether you believe it or not, you're going to see it happen very, very, very quickly. Now that you have let a communist, socialist dictator like Barack Obama come right back in again under Joe Biden. But Joe Biden's not going to give himself off as being your president. He's going to say, this is your dictator right here next to me. And it's going to be Barack Obama standing there. And he's going to say, I am going to run the country and the world through the United Nations. The United Nations will, in most like scenario, they'll come out and say, we are forming a confederation of nations that will bring to bear all military forces of those nations, and they'll all be Muslim nations, and they're going to attack Israel. They're going to attack Israel because God had already declared it 2,000 years ago. There will be nations united under the Antichrist, and they will attack Israel in terms to annihilate that nation off the face of the earth. But guess what's going to happen? God is going to protect Israel himself, and he's going to turn all the weapons they use against Israel, he's going to turn it on them, on those nations. It's going to just bounce right off Israel, and it's going to hit those other countries and eradicate them, annihilate them. Your choice, your hope, today, tomorrow, next week, is to pray that God himself will intervene for this nation, that he will help this country. If you humble yourself before God, he said, I will return to this nation. I will bless America again. If you don't humble yourself, if you think we don't need God, we don't want to recognize God, then you have buried yourself in your own casket. You have already said you don't want help. You don't want anything about what was America to survive. You want to be subjugated. And that's going to be the posterity of your own children. You will have no posterity. There will be nobody to ever look back on America again, because there will be no America. What will happen to this nation within the next 1 to 2 years, the proletariat socialists will restructure America, and it will become the North American Union. What is the North American Union? This is already what's existed in Europe since the late 1970s, early 80s. They created a confederation of European nations. It makes up 10, well, they used to be sovereign nations. The European Union is essentially, it takes all the European nations and it makes it a confederation, and it's now one world of Europe as itself. Now under the North American Union, they're going to conjugate Canada and Mexico together, and it's going to make up one continent. And there will not be America anymore. There won't be Canada no more. There's not going to be a Mexico anymore. It's going to be just that global unification of those nations that used to be there into a continent. And then it's going to be linked all over the world to all these other countries, and it's going to be called the New World Order. George Bush, that's George W. Bush's father, said it after the end of the Gulf War in the 90s. He says, there's a new world order emerging. And he was trying to give everybody a heads up, saying this stuff is already in the works, it's happening. Now under socialism and communism taking over America, they now have what all they've been wanting. They now can converge all of it together. And for the liberals and for the blacks who think you're going to finally get everything you're entitled to, the socialists will never let you keep it. Because their intention is, in the very long term, you're going to lose everything you've ever thought you had, because now it's all going to be a part of this global system. They're all going to be, they're all going to be unified. So that means nothing you have is yours. It doesn't matter what they try to convince you about the protests, about Me Too, about Black Lives Matter. All of that stuff is just going to be totally irrelevant, because they're going to destroy this country. And they're going to use everything you thought they were going to give you. They're going to take it right back, and they're going to say, you've served your purpose, it's over. Now the only thing you have left, folks, is to accept what they're going to do. And then if you defy them, and I'm going to defy them, I'm never taking Barack Obama's mark. I'm never taking the coronavirus vaccine, because all that is a part of their plan to destroy everything. I'm standing firm.
ضرب. أنا كنت في قلب البيت وجتني الضربة. إيش مصدرها؟ إيش منين؟ إيش ما عرفت. شغلة تاني، أنا طلبت من الإعلاميين اللي كانوا موجودين هنيك والمسلحين يطالعوا آثار البقايا، مثلا الصاروخ أو الضربة اللي عم يدعوها أي شيء، يطالعوا البقايا مشان أعرف إيش بدي أحكي معهم، على أساسها نصرح. ورفضوا يطالعوا أي شيء. بالنسبة يعني قبعات البيضاء عم يشتغلوا هن مع الصحافة بدرجة الأولى، وشغلة مهنية عم يستخدموها. منهم بعض منهم بيشتغلوا يعني كعمل إنساني، وبعض منهم كمهني، لأن اليوم الصورة وقت اللي عم بصورها في عليها ثمن. اللقطة اللي بتشتغل بالعاطفة على العاطفة هي لها ثمن.
Hi, I'm George Lucas. In my past 40 years of motion picture making, no subject has so inspired me as this story that happened in August 2016. The world saw a 3-year-old boy on global networks, and it really touched my heart. So much so that I had to tell his story. His name is Omran Daknish. His story is real. It happened. I'm telling this story because millions of other children just like Omran are still being hurt in war-torn countries resulting from neglect, illness, and uncaring masses. We must remember them all. You won't be leaving the movie theater without a tear in your eyes. I hope you'll come.
Amram and Carrie Films comes this true and tragic story of a small 3.5-year-old boy who lived in Aleppo, Syria. His name is Amram Daknish. He was seen one night in an ambulance with blood on his head. His family survived the worst night of their lives when Russian airstrikes destroyed his neighborhood. The world saw him, cried for him, remembers him today. The famous director George Lucas brings this story to life in a way you will never forget because it really happened.